Welcome to my channel. She was just a medic, until the battlefield forced her to remember who she really was. High voltage when her team was ambushed by professional snipers. Erin Kovács picked up a rifle she swore she'd never touch again, and changed the outcome of an entire battle in seconds. From healer to ghost sniper, her past and present collided in the dust of Kashari. I wasn't supposed to be anywhere near the front that day. Fall back, document. You're a medic. That was the order, sharp and cutting through the staccato of gunfire. But orders don't mean much when someone's bleeding out 5 feet away. My name is Erin Kovács, age 27, daughter of a Hungarian forestry ranger and an Austrian trauma nurse. My job was to patch people up, not take lives. I carried a medical kit, not a rifle. That was supposed to be enough. But in the crumbling outskirts of Kashari province, crouched behind what used to be a railway checkpoint, I watched blood seep through the shoulder of Sergeant Kellen Reyes. He was still conscious, but pale. Too pale. I dropped beside him, medical pack open, gauze in hand. A round smacked the wall inches from my head, showering us with brick dust. Another screamed past. The next would have found my skull, if not for instinct. I didn't think. My hand reached for the rifle Kellen had dropped, a Benedict Arms State Route 29, standard issue, cold steel, and black polymer. And just like that, I remembered who I was. 3 rounds. 3 muzzle flashes on the ridgeline. 3 bodies dropped before they could reload. Kellen stared at me like I'd just sprouted wings. From that day, nobody in the team looked at me the same way again. They started whispering about me. Not just as the medic who ran toward gunfire, but something else. Something not quite explainable. Truth is, I hadn't always been a medic. I once went by another name in the field, Vervinal, which means bloodline in my brother's tongue. It was the name he gave me during our years together in the Eastern Carpathians, when we hunted to survive, not to train. My brother, Miklos Kovács, was the sniper. I was his spotter. He taught me everything he knew, from measuring wind with your tongue to counting enemy heartbeats. Before he died. Before I swore I'd never kill again. Before I buried the part of me that could make impossible shots. That part of me stayed hidden for years, tucked into the smallest corner of my soul, marked only by a single brass casing I kept on a chain beneath my shirt. But that day in Kashari, the old instincts didn't ask for permission. They kicked down the door and took over. The others didn't know my story. To them, I was just the quiet girl from Medical Support Unit 9, the one who skipped mess hall gatherings and stayed up late cataloging supplies and logging treatment reports with surgical precision. Sergeant Lucas Brandt once joked during a debriefing, "Don't hand her a gun. She might patch the target instead of shoot him." I didn't correct him. I never corrected anyone. Let them believe what they wanted. But I noticed things. Bullet fragments didn't match standard rebel ammo. Wounds weren't random. They were surgical. Sniper work. Trained. Coordinated. During a routine leg dressing for Corporal Jean, I extracted a bullet that shimmered too cleanly. A tight-grooved core. Custom machining. I held it up to the light and said softly, "This isn't local. Someone brought a pro into our sector." Jean chuckled. "Doc, you know bullets better than half the weapons team. But can you shoot him?" I hesitated. "Only for a heartbeat." "I know enough," I replied. He thought I was joking. But the truth was simple. I didn't forget. I chose not to remember. Until someone made me. We were still 2 days out from our extraction window when everything went to hell. The mission was supposed to be low risk. Recon and extraction at Narrow Point Ravine, a canyon wedge between the southern ridgelines of Kashari. Intelligence suggested light resistance. No sniper threat. Nothing special. They were wrong. We moved in before dawn. Team Echo 6, 8 operators led by Captain Arden Wolf, swept forward in a loose triangle. I trailed behind, 50 meters back, monitoring vitals and field status feeds. The first shot came from nowhere. Sergeant Brandt fell, mid-step, his arm hanging limp. He didn't scream, just dropped. I sprinted. Didn't wait for clearance. Didn't listen for orders. My boots hit shale and broken stone as I skidded to his side. Already working. "Fall back, Kovács!" Wolf's voice barked over the comms. "Get behind cover." Too late. 2 more rounds slammed into the concrete rail stanchions beside me, each no more than a hand's width away. They weren't suppressive. They were directed. Measured. They were aiming for the medic. As I pressed gauze to Brant's wound, my mind ran calculations like it had been programmed for this very moment. Subsonic rounds. Suppressed fire. Distance, 800 meters. Slight echo delay. Wind carrying northeast. I didn't even need to see them to know. Sniper nest. Northeast ridge. Elevation, 30 degrees, I said aloud. Wolf scanned. Can't see them. Move, Reyes. No time. I interrupted, voice flatter than I meant. They're hurting us. Crossfire in 60 seconds. We're being driven into a kill zone. I saw the pattern clear as day. Bullet strikes formed a perimeter. Not random. Not chaotic. Strategic. Hurting fire. And then it happened. The same moment I saw the glint of a scope behind the skeletal frame of a collapsed antenna, Corporal Jean took a round clean through the thigh. He dropped hard. His rifle fell beside him. It was the same model Miklos had trained me with, the State Route 29. I hesitated. I had sworn with every cell in my body, that I'd never lift a weapon again. Not after Miklos. Not after I held him in my arms as he bled out on a winter ridgeline in Moldova, having shielded civilians from a barrage meant for them. He died whispering, "You're not the killer, Erin. You're the one who brings them home." And yet, another round hit the wall. My instincts flared. I saw the second sniper shift position, triangulating angles. Then I heard my brother's voice again. Not in memory. In instinct. Between heartbeats, the impossible becomes real. I picked up the rifle. My fingers moved like they hadn't forgotten a thing. Breath. Shoulder press. Left hand firm. Right hand calm. Idoscope. Focus on movement. Wind, 3 knots left. Drop angle, 11 degrees. Target acquired. First shot. Ridge flash. Impact confirmed. Second sniper, adjusting. Muzzle twitch. Second shot. Through brush, slight left lead. Hit confirmed. Third was moving fast, shifting downhill. I dialed ahead. Tracked for 3 meters. He ducked behind twisted steel. I ricocheted off a beam. Hit. Silence. 3 threats. 15 seconds. When I lowered the rifle, the entire unit was staring at me. Brant was pale, still bleeding. Jean groaned behind me. But no more rounds came. No more fire. Just the sound of wind moving through the rocks. Wolf's voice cracked through the comms. "Who trained you?" I didn't answer. I just reached for my medkit again. The battlefield was still. For now. Wolf crouched near the ridge wall, scanning through his scope while I packed gauze into Jin's wound. "You ricocheted off a steel beam," he said quietly. "No amateur pulls that off." I didn't reply. I couldn't. Brant sat up with help, eyes wide, face pale. "Doc, what the hell was that?" Jean just laughed, wincing. "That wasn't a medic," he muttered. "That was a ghost. A damn ghost." They were half right. In my medkit, beneath the second row of trauma bandages, lay a hidden cloth bundle I never touched unless I had to. I'd wrapped it myself, back when I still thought I could outrun who I'd been. I undid the wrapping now, revealing a polished brass casing, one Miklos had given me on our last joint mission. Etched on the side were words so small they needed a scope to read. "Fire when your heartbeat is quietest." That casing had once belonged to him. Now it was mine. The memory hit harder than the gunfire had. We were in northern Serbia. The snow was falling sideways. Miklos had taken an overwatch position. I was on his scope. We had 6 civilians to extract and 2 hostiles closing in. He'd said, "I'll shoot only if you call it." I had called it. The bullet saved them. Later that night, in the snow and ash, he pressed the casing into my palm. "I'm not giving you a rifle, Erin," he'd said. "I'm giving you a reminder that what we do matters." But after he died, I buried it all. I left our unit. Burned my sniper qualification in a trash barrel behind an embassy. Applied to a humanitarian military medical school the next month. I swore my bullets would never fly again. That oath lasted 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. And today it broke. Back at the temporary base, no one treated me the same. The med tent, usually a place where I worked alone, now filled with sidelong glances and unasked questions. The operators I'd treated in silence now watched me like I was someone else. Not the quiet medic with a perfect triage record. Something more. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" Brant asked again later that night. I sat cleaning instruments in the glow of a storm lantern. "My brother," I said. "He was the best sniper I ever knew. He taught me everything." Wolf entered then, face shadowed, voice low. "That wasn't just everything. That was elite-level sniping. That was something we'd expect from Black Task. I met his gaze. We weren't Black Task. We were just two kids from the forest who learned the hard way how to survive. He didn't press further. He just nodded, slowly. But I could tell. He knew there was more. There always is. The next morning came gray and quiet, the kind of silence that means trouble is waiting just out of sight. I was restocking bandages when Wolf appeared outside my tent flap. He didn't knock, just waited until I looked up. "You've been tracking sniper patterns, haven't you?" I blinked, then slowly nodded. "Not just treating wounds," he added. "You've been studying them." I reached for a worn leather notebook from beneath my cot. It was creased, stained with iodine, and packed with tight notes, caliber measurements, strike angles, wound paths. I flipped to a marked page and handed it to him. He read in silence. Then another page. Then another. "These entries," he said slowly. "They're coordinated fire zones." I nodded. "Based on entry wounds, fragment patterns, time of day." I didn't have formal intel access, so I reverse engineered it from bodies. He looked up. "You built a sniper heat map from field injuries." "It wasn't hard," I replied. "When you've been on the other side of the scope, it's easy to see." Wolf set the notebook down like it was radioactive. "These shooters weren't local insurgents," I continued. "They're mercs. Hired guns. The wounds are too clean. Fire discipline too tight. They're targeting medics, officers, high-value personnel." "Why didn't you bring this up in briefing?" he asked. I gave a tired smile. "Because I'm a medic, and people already think I step outside my lane." He sat down opposite me, his boots dusty and torn from the last mission. "You think there's a command post?" I nodded. 3 clicks north of Narrow Point. The angles match. They've been coordinating from high ground. That last trio? They weren't random placements. That was Overwatch. He ran a hand over his face. And we walked right into it. I tried to stay out of it, I admitted. Tried to just treat the damage, not look for the cause. "But that's not you," Wolf said. "No," I said quietly. "It's not." I opened another flap on my kit and pulled out a small steel scope mount, military grade, precision fit. I'd pulled it from Sergeant Barretto's shoulder 2 weeks ago. It had been embedded in flesh, left behind like a signature. "This doesn't come from the black market," I told Wolf. "This came from someone with real resources." His jaw clenched. "This changes everything." "It always did," I said. "We just hadn't looked close enough." And deep down, I knew what came next. If I was right, and I always was about this kind of thing, then the next move would be a full-scale hit. And I was done hiding. It didn't take long for the storm to break. Just after noon, while I was finishing an internal suture on Sergeant Barretto's leg, the radio hissed to life. "All units, this is command. Be advised, multiple hostile elements converging on Narrow Point sector. Estimated strength, company size. Possible armored support." Wolf barged into the tent before the transmission ended. "They're moving faster than we thought." I nodded, cutting the final stitch. "They're not just reacting to the last ambush. They're retaliating." I packed my gear quickly, sliding Barretto's cot toward the wall. The med tent shook slightly from the distant rumble of vehicles. "Heavy ones. They know their sniper cell's been neutralized," I muttered. "Now they want to clean house before we follow the trail." Wolf looked at me. "We need Overwatch. High ground. You know the terrain better than anyone. We need you up there." I froze. The request was clear. Unmistakable. "You want me on the rifle." "I need you on the rifle," he corrected. I closed my eyes for a second. Let the weight of the past wash over me. Then I opened the small compartment in my med bag. The brass casing was still there. Still warm. Still mine. I pulled out the State Route 29, the same rifle I'd carried across too many countries, too many missions. My hands didn't shake. Not anymore. "I'll need 2 minutes to zero the scope," I said. "Then I'll hold them." Wolf placed a hand on my shoulder. "You're sure?" "No," I said. "But I'm done hiding." He nodded. "Then we'll cover your climb." I slipped out through the north breach in the camp perimeter and began the hike toward Hollow Spine Ridge, a jagged overlook that had once been considered tactically useless. Not anymore. I reached the plateau in 9 minutes. I'd mapped every step in my head days ago. From this elevation, I could see the valley floor unravel like a dark carpet. Dust trails marked inbound hostiles. 7 technicals. Infantry squads moving in a crescent pattern. They were coming to finish the job. I checked wind. Adjusted elevation. Breathed deep. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't glory. It was protection. I radioed Wolf. Position locked. Advise evac routes and fire pattern requests. His voice came back low and steady. Anything you've got, document, make it count. I settled into the prone. The rifle hummed against my cheek like a familiar song. As I adjusted my scope, the brass casing brushed against my collarbone. I whispered, "Miklos, let's keep them safe." And I squeezed the trigger. The first target was a gunner on a technical truck, sweeping the left flank with a mounted. 50 calories. My round passed through the side mirror and into his neck. He never even turned his head. The second dropped his RPG before he could take aim. By the time the third dropped behind cover, I'd already ricocheted a round off the side of a burnout tractor frame and tagged him behind the shoulder. I wasn't counting consciously, but later I'd realized the final number, 37 rounds fired, all placed with surgical precision between 400 and 1,200 meters. 0 coalition casualties after I took over watch. It wasn't just shooting. It was something else. A rhythm. A trance. My breath matched the wind. My heart beat only when I needed it to. I didn't fire in panic. I didn't fire to kill. I fired to stop the next bullet from hitting someone else. Each shot was chosen. The fourth clipped a driver's wrist, causing his truck to veer into a ditch. The fifth took out a drone controller. The sixth, through the barrel of a disassembled mortar tube, stopped an indirect strike before it even began. Wolf's voice stayed on comms, steady but distant. "We're repositioning. Extraction route confirmed. Reinforcements 7 minutes out." "Copy," I said, already lining up the next shot. When the shooting finally stopped, when the valley below began to empty of enemies, I let the rifle fall gently beside me. My hands were steady, but my heart was somewhere else. Somewhere cold and snow-covered, holding Miklo's hand as he bled out. Somewhere in a past I thought I could erase. I touched the casing at my throat. "I did what I promised," I whispered. "I kept them alive." And for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't dared to feel since that winter ridge. Peace. The extraction dragged on for nearly 4 hours. I didn't move from my position until every last man was accounted for. When I finally descended from Hollow Spine Ridge, the SEALs were waiting at the edge of the field tents. Most didn't speak, just nodded, eyes following my every move as if unsure what they were seeing. I walked past them, rifle slung behind my shoulder, medkit back in place. I went straight to the triage zone and started checking pulses. Business as usual, until Corporal Jean appeared in my tent doorway, carrying a small wooden box. "We put something together," he said, voice softer than I'd ever heard it. He handed me the box. Inside were 3 brass casings, each one polished and engraved. "Medic, sniper, sister. These are from yesterday," he said. "From the shots that saved us. We marked them." I picked up the one that said sister, my fingers tracing the etching. "Why sister?" I asked quietly. Jean met my eyes. "Because you're one of us now. Not just the medic. Not just the ghost with a rifle. Your family." I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything at all. That night, back in my cot, I pulled out the original casing from Miklos. Then I added the new one, sister, to the chain beside it. 2 pieces of metal. 2 lives. Finally united. The next morning, I found Captain Wolf outside the comms tent, arms crossed, face unreadable. "They confirmed your theory," he said. I didn't need to ask what he meant. "The command post?" I said anyway. "Exactly where you said it would be. Abandoned by the time we got there, but left behind a mess of encrypted logs, targeting data, and recon feeds. Someone was pulling strings. These weren't freelance mercs. This was organized." He handed me a sealed envelope. "Orders, or maybe a commendation." I didn't open it. "There's talk of a recommendation," Wolf added, "for cross-training into intelligence or counter-sniper ops. Command's impressed." I held the envelope loosely. "I'm not interested in being a sniper again. You think you have a choice?" I turned to him, the brass casing at my throat warm against my skin. "I made my choice already." He studied me a long moment. "And what's that?" "I'm a medic. That's who I am. But if that oath ever stands in the way of protecting my team." I looked back at the tents, at the wounded men I'd stitched up, at the operators who now looked at me not as support, but as a cornerstone. "Then I'll be whatever they need me to be." Later that night, I sat alone at the range. I didn't fire a shot. Instead, I laid out a quiet memorial. Miklo's photo, the original casing he gave me, and the 3 new ones from the unit. My past, my present, and something new growing between them. Wolf showed up just before midnight. "Second thoughts?" he asked. "No," I said. "First ones." I tapped the casing that said sister. I thought I had to choose between saving lives and taking them. But yesterday proved that sometimes, to save one, you must do the other. Wolf nodded. "And that doesn't make you less of a medic." "It makes me a better one," I said. Word spread fast. What happened at Narrow Point wasn't just a story. It became something whispered in other units, passed in mess halls and across radio channels. About the silent medic who picked up a rifle and turned the tide of a battle with 3 perfect shots, and 34 more after that. I didn't feed the stories. I didn't deny them either. Every morning, I reported to the medical tent, checked vitals, restocked kits, updated casualty logs. Same as before. But the looks had changed. The questions too. "Doc, what caliber was this one? Hey Kovacs, how'd you make that ricochet shot?" Most days, I just smiled. Other times, I'd say something like, "Knowing how a bullet travels helps you know how to stop it." But inside, I felt the shift. Not from outside eyes, but in myself. I had spent years convincing myself I could only be one thing. The healer or the hunter. The guardian or the ghost. But the truth is messier than that. Because the same focus that made me a marksman also made me a better medic. The steady hands, the controlled breath, the ability to silence chaos. It all came from the same place. And now, for the first time in years, I didn't resent that place. I respected it. The night before we rotated out of Kashari, I found myself cleaning my rifle beside my medkit. Equal attention to both. No shame. No guilt. Just purpose. I told Wolf I didn't want to be a sniper again. And I didn't. But if the next fight required it, I would be. Not for glory. Not for vengeance. For the people who stood beside me and called me sister. Because sometimes, the only language an enemy understands is precision. When our deployment ended, I left Kashari with a duffel of medical gear, a rifle cleaned to inspection standards, and a chain around my neck that clinked when I walked. For casings now. Miklo's original, etched with his final lesson, and 3 from Narrow Point. Medic, sniper, sister. I never asked for those titles. But I accepted them, finally, as mine. I used to think I had to bury parts of myself to be good, to be useful. That to become a healer, I had to erase the part of me that had once placed bullets through coin-sized gaps from half a mile away. But I understand now. The ability to harm and the choice not to, that's not weakness. That's control. I didn't stop being a sniper when I walked away. That part of me didn't die with Miklos. It waited. And when the moment came, it didn't hesitate. Because what I had trained to do in silence for years wasn't about destruction. It was about protection. Miklos used to say, "The bullet only matters if it changes what would have happened otherwise." And mine did. They didn't glorify me in reports. They didn't pin a medal on my chest. I didn't want either. But somewhere in 100 field journals, I left notes, detailed, clinical, precise, about injuries that didn't happen. Wounds I prevented. Soldiers who lived. Each one a story without a shot fired. But I remember them. Because sometimes, the truest way to honor what you can do is to only do it when nothing else will suffice. So I keep training. Keep patching up wounds. And when a young recruit asks why I carry 4 casings around my neck, I smile and say, they remind me who I am. All of me.